In the last installment of this series, we went over Circus Magazine's Readers' Poll winners for 1983. So in strict sequence, we're going to discuss their Readers' Poll for 1984. We'll talk about its categories and choices, as well as whether those decisions make any sort of sense. Stay tuned. First off, thanks to the folks who commented on the last Readers' Poll video. Apparently that Duran bass player is pretty good, according to quite a few of you, so duly noted. Speaking of which, that 1983 list was definitely a bit weighted down by pop acts. But this time around, we're going to see the balance more in favor of hard rock and heavy metal. Thankfully. As for this list, some acts from the 1983 list will be returning. Some others are new, and one band in particular will dominate more than a few of the categories. No, not Def Leppard this time, but rather a certain sleazy crew of gents from Hollywood. You already know who I'm talking about. Also, some of you commented last time about the suspicious absence of Dio, either the band or the man. Well, both show up in this year's list, and more so in the 1985 list. So you have all of that to look forward to. Of course, 1984 isn't only a year, it's also a hit album, so expect to see that appear in this poll as well. And speaking of the poll, it's found in the February 28, 1985 issue of Circus magazine. Obviously, it comes out the following year from the one poll because time travel doesn't exist. At least, not yet. So with all of that, let's check out the categories. So just so you know, I'll be skipping the best brass/win section because there's no metal there. And I'm also skipping best keyboards, except that Don Airey of Ozzy's band is here again, but at number 2, which is pretty decent. That aside, let's get to biggest disappointment of the year. And straight away at number 5, we have Rush. And I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about Rush. I've tried to get into them over the years. I've had numerous friends trying to get me into them over the years, and I don't know if it just hasn't taken. I do like a few singles here and there, and maybe I need to delve into the catalog a little bit more, and all of that, blah, 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 but I don't know. Because of that, I can't tell you what Rush was really doing in 1984. Is this deserved? Is this not deserved? Let me know in the comments if you're a Rush fan, you think it is or isn't. I know they did have a couple bigger albums before whatever the album is in 1984. Can't tell me that in the comments. But yeah, just not my bag. So at number 4, we've got AC/DC. They're down from number 3. Last year, they were at number 3. Interesting choice, AC/DC. Obviously, Flick of the Switch came out the previous year. We wouldn't see Fly on the Wall until 1985. So maybe a little of this has something to do with no album in 1984. Or no studio album, that is. It might also have to do with the fact that AC/DC isn't doing as well as they were before. Flick of the Switch wasn't as well received as it could have been. And I don't think Fly on the Wall did that much better. But yeah, I love Flick of the Switch. I think it's a great album. It did hold me over through 1984 quite a bit. I think of it more as the 1984 album, even though it came out in 1983. But I think a lot of other people just didn't feel that about AC/DC at this time. So AC/DC at number 4. At number 3, we've got Van Halen. They are down from number 1, which means they are less of a disappointment in 1984, probably having something to do with that album. Also named 1984, they're doing pretty well here. But they're still on the disappointment list, which is kind of interesting. Is it the introduction of synths? Is it some of the poppier sound on the album overall? I don't know. I mean, the album did pretty well, so it depends on who is voting in this poll. We just don't know. But here they are at number 3. At number 2, we've got Def Leppard. They're down, or they're up rather, from number 3 last year, which means they are slightly more of a disappointment. Let's see, Pyromania came out in 1983. Def Leppard did not put an album out in 1984. Or in 1985, or in 1986. In fact, it'd be 87 by the time Hysteria came out. So maybe that's the disappointment. Maybe also the sheen of a new band is starting to wear off with some folks. Who knows? Maybe they're just saturated in the media too much. I can't really say, but they are a disappointment to some folks. So Def Leppard at number 2. And at number 1, and I think this one makes quite a bit of sense in 1984, it is Quiet Riot. 1984, Quiet Riot put out Condition Critical. It was the album following their monster album, Metal Health. Condition Critical did not do so well, as many of us know. They did yet another Slade cover song, and Mama We're All Crazy Now. And they did a single for the song Party All Night, which I think is a really good song. I love the music video. But I guess a lot of other people didn't because the album just didn't do well. Could also be Kevin DuBrow. He's a bit of a loudmouth at this point. He's kind of infamous in the media for talking a lot of smack. So maybe people are liking Quiet Riot less because of that. Rudy Zarzo liked Quiet Riot less because he later left the band. So there it is, Quiet Riot, the #1 most disappointing band of 1984. Next up is Comeback of the Year. I love this category because some of those older bands that you loved are back in action, and it's really exciting. There's at least a couple bands in here that I very much agree with. Start with number 5. This is the Scorpions. Makes a whole lot of sense. As much as I love Blackout, I'm really a big fan of Love at First Sting. Obviously, that came out in 1984, spawned a few singles. Obviously, Rock You Like a Hurricane, Big City Nights, Still Loving You. And there was a minor hit, too, in, God, what was that song? I'm Leaving You. I had to think about the video. Fun video, by the way. You should watch that after this. Scorpions, of course, were riding high off this album. Rock You Like a Hurricane was a major, major single. We're still singing that song to this day. So, big comeback for the Scorpions. I think they kind of entered the sort of pop metal era of the 1980s. I think they kind of caught up with all of that. So, yeah, Scorpions at number 5. Makes a lot of sense. At number 4, and here's where we bring in the man himself, Ronnie James Dio. And I like it's a comeback for Ronnie, not a comeback for his band necessarily. Remember, again, 1983 was Holy Diver. 1984, he put out The Last in Line, which I think was a bigger album. I like it a bit more. It is my favorite Dio album. Maybe I'm a little bit biased in that regard, but I like seeing Ronnie here. Of course, he had some good years in Rainbow. He had some decent years in Black Sabbath, but I really think he came into his own in his solo band. I think 1984 is the perfect year to show you that. So yeah, at number 4, Ronnie James Dio. At number 3, we have Yes. Don't know a lot about this band as well. I think they fall into similar categories with Rush. Yes did put out Owner of a Lonely Heart. I think it was in late 83, early 84. I can't remember which, but obviously that was a big single, and they're probably riding on that as well. Yes is also very much part of the 1980s at this point, and sort of 80s pop. I think former Yes fans probably know there's a bit of difference between this era of the band and the 70s stuff they did. But yeah, Yes at number 3. At number 2 is Van Halen. I have to agree wholeheartedly. I love 1984. I don't think it's a perfect album, but I think it's a lot better than Diver Down, which is not a great album to me at all. I mean, 5 cover songs on that record. A lot of conflict between Eddie and Dave on that record, musically and otherwise. I think it shows on Diver Down quite a bit. So I feel like 1984 really was a breath of fresh air following that album that I wasn't too fond of. So I definitely agree. Van Halen at number 2. And of course, the #1 comeback of the year, still at number 1 from last year, which is interesting, is Kiss. Apparently you can make 2 comebacks or 1 comeback twice a year. Not sure how that really works. At this point, Kiss has put out Animalize. This is their 2nd album without makeup. Lick It Up last year being the first. Great album. I don't remember doing as well as this list makes it out to be. Maybe I just wasn't paying that much attention. I do like the album quite a bit. I have some real favorites on it, but again, I think it's a little surprising to see Kiss here in this #1 slot. But I'll take it because they're my favorite band. So there it is, Kiss. Biggest comeback of the year. Next up is Best Rock Video. I love this category. It's very much a child of the 1980s with the introduction of MTV in 1981, all those great music videos, some of which are completely outlandish. And again, I think they were outlandish because there were no templates to follow back then. Everything was kind of new, so you could just go nuts as a producer. I love that. And it was great in heavy metal and hard rock too. You saw a lot of weird stuff. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in this list. So at number 5, we've got The Last in Line from Dio. I love this goddamn video. It's so great. You have actor Mino Palouse, cousin to Slay Moon Fry, by the way, playing this metal kid. He's a delivery boy, and he goes to this building to deliver whatever the hell, and takes the elevator, and the elevator goes down to hell, and the video continues from there. I love that. I love also, and I think this is the 16-year-old me in this, loves the part in that video where, Dio sings the soft part, right until the elevator just plummets down to hell. And that's he's like, down! So good. Apparently at 54, I still love that part. So there it is. So great video. I should say, and this is a good time to say this, is that there's a documentary coming out on Ronnie James Dio. And I know there are segments where they talk album by album because I saw a couple clips from it. And there is a Last in Line clip where they specifically talk about the music video. So I'm really excited to see the whole movie when it comes out. Is it out? I'm not sure. I think it's being played in limited engagements, whatever the hell that means. So yeah, if you've seen it already, let me know in the comments because I'm definitely going to be getting it. I don't even just see the whole thing. I'll just buy it because that's how much I love Dio. But anyways, there he is, Dio at number 5. At number 4, we've got I Wanna Rock from Twisted Sister. Of course, we're going to see Twisted Sister in 1984. Stay Hungry was this gigantic album with 2 really strong singles and a not so strong single in The Price. But I Wanna Rock, this video, as well as another one we're going to talk about from the band shortly, has an obvious theme. There's that sort of teen rebellion thing, but you also have the guy from Animal House who plays Niedermeyer, and he does the same character, except he's just this angry dad. It's also the era of the PMRC and stuff like that. So kind of a fun era for Twisted Sister to put out comical music videos, if you will, and they definitely are that. Definitely cartoonish in a lot of ways. But I Wanna Rock, decent video. I think the next one in the number 2 slot, I guess I'll ruin it for you, is a better video. We'll talk about that shortly. So Twisted Sister at number 4. At number 3, we do have Panama from Van Halen. Love this song. Great video as well. And I'm going to ruin it for you yet again. We're going to talk about Van Halen shortly as well in the rock video category. Great video. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that anyways, because I want to talk about that video and the other video in the number 1 slot. There it is. Anyways, at number 2, we've got We're Not Gonna Take It from Twisted Sister. Again, both videos have a big common tie in terms of content, but also the videos themselves. It's funny how a lot of people had problems with these videos. The PMRC comes to mind, saying they were, violent and all this stuff, and it's like, it's literally a Looney Tunes cartoon come to life. In fact, to be honest, Twisted Sister was a little bit cartoony looking as well. We get into that later, but maybe their image got more and more caricature, if you will, at this point. But, they're riding high in 1984. Stay Hungry is an amazing album. So, yeah, both videos are actually pretty cool. So there it is. And of course, number 1, because I ruined it for you, it's Van Halen again with Hot for Teacher. The better of the 2 videos, hands down. And I gotta say, this is probably the time to say it, I hate the song Jump. Like, I hate it a lot. It was not what got me into the album. In fact, I put off getting 1984 because of that song. It really was the double punch of Panama and Hot for Teacher that did it for me, especially these 2 music videos. That's definitely when I bought the album. Love both songs, love both videos. I think this is the better, for sure. I love the plot of the 4 kids, the young rocker kids, going to school and raising hell. I think even at 16, I wish I had been that 10-year-old kid, maybe who discovered heavy metal a little earlier than I did. I don't know. Maybe there's a little jealousy there. Weirdly placed, I guess. But anyways, here we are. Van Halen, Hot for Teacher, number 1 rock video. Next up is Best Single, and I'm pleased to say that there is no Duran Duran on this list whatsoever. Fantastic. So number 5, we've got We're Not Gonna Take It from Twisted Sister. Makes a lot of sense. Again, this song did pretty well for itself, as well as I Wanna Rock. Kind of wish The Price did better. It's a bit of the ballad on the B side of the record. I actually like that song quite a bit. I do like some of the deeper cuts on that record, though, too. I love SMF. The Beast is fun. Don't Let Me Down. I think there's some good stuff on that record that gets kind of ignored. The title track is amazing. I think it's one of the best songs on there. But yeah, We're Not Gonna Take It. It's a big song. I get it. At number 4, we've got the Scorpions with Rock You Like a Hurricane. Again, monster song off a monster album. Pretty cool to see it here. I have no qualms about the song being here whatsoever. I do love the music video to it quite a bit. The cryogenic tubes they're in, and the people try to fight their way in through a cage to get at them. I love that stuff, especially in 1984, but even in 2022. So there you go. Anyways, at number 3 is a bit of a surprise for me, even though, again, this is my favorite band. The song is Heaven's on Fire from Kiss. Yeah, I mean, good song. I mean, there wasn't too much off this album that really hit. This was probably the big hit off this record, but MTV played the crap out of this video. Of course, this is back when MTV didn't have as many videos in their library as they did years later, so they were playing new videos over and over again, even in a single day. I don't know if some of you remember back in 1984, but they would have like the world premiere of, say, Heaven's on Fire from Kiss. We're going to play it at noon, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 o'clock. It's like, every couple hours, really? But again, they just didn't have as many videos, so that's what they had to resort to. It was a thing. And I'm sure Heavens on Fire was on that list as well. So I'm kind of okay with this. I'm a little surprised by it, but I'm not every Circus Magazine reader's poll person to fill out stuff. So there you go. Number 2 is Van Halen with Jump. I understand. It's a big single. Lots and lots of people loved it. But I don't know. I think Panama and Hot for Teacher are just better songs. So I didn't agree with it. But that's okay. I'm not everyone. So there it is. I do like the number 1 choice here for best single. It is Rat with Round and Round. That song was just so huge. I loved that album a lot. I like that Rat's here. Of course, they belong in 1984 because they definitely were quite a big album. Quite a big band with quite a big album. There's my English. Along with another band we're going to talk about in a little bit. Both LA bands, obviously. Is this song bigger than Jump? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm glad it's here, but again, I'm not everyone. So, yeah. But I like seeing this. It's a great song, great music video. Again, maybe this should have been one of the big videos on this list. I don't know, but very cool. Anyways, Rat, number 1. Next up is Best Album, and I gotta agree with quite a few of these. Maybe one I have a little more of an issue with than the others. And number 5 is Defenders of the Faith from Judas Priest. God, I love to see this album here. Of course, this is my favorite Judas Priest album, so again, maybe there's a little bit of a bias. I discovered Judas Priest on this album. It was the 1-2 punch of this album and Screaming for Vengeance. I bought them together at the tail end of sophomore year of high school, which was May or June of 1984 for me. So I love these albums. They're definitely sister albums or brother albums, if you will. I can listen to them back to back. They got the unifying artwork and all that kind of stuff. So love seeing it here. This is the only time we're going to see Judas Priest on this list, by the way. Thank goodness. But definitely agree with this one at number 5. Number 4, we've got Power Slave from Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is down from number 2 here, which is interesting. So last year, they were at number 2 with Peace of Mind. This year, Power Slave, but down at number 4. And it makes me think that maybe Power Slave wasn't as widely well received as Peace of Mind. I'm not really sure about that. I love Power Slave, but even back then, I thought Peace of Mind was a slightly better album. I liked Power Slave more and more as I got older, but maybe I didn't feel that in 1984. I'm not really sure. But still great songs this album. It should still be on this best album list for sure, but I don't know, maybe a little higher than 4. I don't know. Kind of crazy. Anyways, at number 3, we've got Love at First Sting from the Scorpions. Of course, killer album with all the hits and all that stuff, and the Scorpions getting into what would maybe be called hair metal or pop metal or whatever you want to call it. That they were definitely part and parcel with that at this point for sure. And number 2, we've got Rat with Out of the Cellar. Again, great album. I remember pilfering this cassette from a convenience store in Salt Lake City when it came out. Apparently my criminal past didn't stop with the early years I talked about in my my metal discovery videos. But here it is again. Bringing it up. Why not? Great album. The video for Round and Round and Back for More and Wanted Man. Man, this album is just killer. Saw those videos like all throughout 1984. Loved them. So there it is. Number 2, Rat, Out of the Cellar. And number 1 is kind of interesting because it's a tie. Obviously, you would know 1984 from Van Halen would probably be one of those albums, but the other one is Shout at the Devil from Motley Crue, which is really interesting considering that Shout at the Devil came out in September of 1983. So it's not a 1984 album, but a lot of people were still talking about it in 1984. And I kind of wonder if the album didn't get well promoted until 1984. I mean, I didn't even really know about it until January or February of that year. So that was when I was listening to it. A lot of my friends were as well, especially that sort of spring of 84 and summer of 84. That album was pretty big with all of us. So maybe that's what happened. Maybe that's why it's on the list, because it was still doing really, really well at the time. But it's interesting because they're 2 very different albums. I mean, despite the fact that Vince Neil and other guys in that band definitely cite Van Halen as an influence, but it just comes out very differently in the mix. 2 very different albums, but it's nice to see them both here, I guess. But, if I were to break the tie, obviously it's Shout at the Devil. So there it is. Next up is Best Drums. A couple interesting choices here. At number 5, we have Bobby Blotzer, which is not a very metal name, is it? Bobby Blotzer. Be that as it may, obviously he's the drummer for Rat. Should he be here? I'm not sure. I don't remember his drums being particularly spectacular on Out of the Cellar or even the Rat EP. Maybe as a drummer you know differently. You should let me know in the comments. But it seems like this might be more of a popularity pick because Rat's in the spotlight at this point. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, at number 4, we've got Eric Carr of Kiss. The late Eric Carr, of course. He's amazing. Great drummer. I think I preferred him more on Asylum. I think he shows more of his talent on that record, and that's the album after this. But Animalize was quite an album for him as well. There's some great moments drumming-wise on there as well. He's amazing. I think out of the isolated solos that Kiss did live, and I usually hate those to death, I think Eric's was the most interesting. It was the one I could actually sit through and not be like, oh, time to go buy a t-shirt or go to the bathroom or whatever. So yeah, very cool to see Eric Carr in here. Very cool indeed. So number 3, we've got Neil Peart of Rush. He is down from number 2. So again, Rush's popularity, I'm just going to assume it's not what it was. And again, you Rush fans can tell me that or deny that, depending. But there it is. At number 2, we have Alex Van Halen. He is up from number 3, which means people are paying more attention to him. At least the Circus magazine readers poll people are. Great drumming on 1984. Despite maybe the choice of drums might not be a thing. I know there's some electronic drums maybe. Are there rototoms? I'm not even sure. Again, I'm not a drummer. But you can hear the difference in the drum sound in 1984 compared to previous albums. So yeah. But he's still a great drummer. Why not be here? And the number 1 best drums go to Tommy Lee. That's pretty interesting. I think he's a decent drummer. I think it's fun that he can drum upside down, I guess. But number 1 drummer, I mean, ahead of Neil Peart and Alex Van Halen. Yeah, that's a popularity pick for sure. If I were to reorder this list, I don't know who I'd pick for 5. I might bump Bobby entirely, but I would definitely put Neil Peart at number 1, Alex at 2, Eric Carr at number 3, then maybe Tommy Lee at 4. But yeah, you know, popularity picks. They're going to be a thing in these readers' polls. And I think this is a good example of that very thing. But yeah. Next up is the best bass category. Some interesting choices here. Number 5, we have Gene Simmons. That's an interesting choice. As a bass player myself, and as a Kiss fan as well, I even have to say that I don't know if Gene really fits in the top 5 bass players of 1984. When I started learning to play bass in 1984, actually, I learned a whole bunch of Kiss songs. I thought Gene Simmons was the greatest thing since sliced bread and he could do no wrong and all that kind of stuff. But it took me many years later when I got a little better, and I'm still not amazing by any stretch, but I looked back at some of his bass lines and all of that, and I was like, his stuff is really simplistic. Like, it's exceptionally simplistic. And maybe that's why it's such a great person to study when you're just starting out. Because you can play Gene Simmons bass lines for days. They're not that tough. So I think it's interesting he's on this list. I think he's on here because of popularity. I think it's also because of the fact that he's so iconic. You know, he's from this amazing band that was very visual. I mean, he spit blood and breathed fire, you know, so everyone knows Gene Simmons. So sure, pick him, put him on the list, I guess. But if we're talking about bass playing, come now, right? So anyways, there he is at number 5. At number 4, we got Rudy Sarzo. He is down from number 1. I think that's the Quiet Riot curse right there, because Rudy Sarzo is an amazing bass player. I mean, he did some stuff with Ozzy, but he did stuff with Quiet Riot and later Whitesnake that's really cool. And even after that, I mean, if you want to see a really great bass player, you can get on YouTube, since you're already on, and look up Rudy Sarzo and some of his bass stuff that he's done. Yeah, I think he should be higher than number 4 on this list personally. And I think we could bump at least one person out of the way to make room for him here. But I'm going to get to that in a bit. Yeah, Rudy Sarzo, fantastic bass player. Should be higher. So at number 3, we've got Geddy Lee. He is up from number 5. So he's doing better, but Rush is not. That's interesting. Geddy Lee, of course, by this time, everyone knows he's a great bass player. I think even lay people, non-musicians, if you will, know he's a great bass player. They might be harkening back to earlier Rush because maybe they're not listening to modern Rush. I don't know. But he was covered in a lot of magazines. He was covered in Circus quite a bit, I'm sure. So everyone knows Geddy Lee, even if you don't know bass players that well. So maybe that's why he's up from 5 all of a sudden. I don't know. I really can't tell you the fickleness of these readers' poll folks. But there it is. He's still on the list. Let's be grateful for that. It was number 2. We have Michael Anthony of Van Halen. I've always thought he was a great bass player. I don't always think he's given the room to shine in that band. He is overshadowed by that guitar player guy. Maybe the drummer as well, to some degree, but he is a great bass player. I'll give him that. And he does some decent stuff in 1984. I think he did much interesting stuff on the older albums, to be honest. But yeah, so there's that. And the number 1 best bass player is Nikki Sixx. First of all, he's a competent bass player. I think he's done some good work. I don't know if Shot at the Devil is the mark of that distinction. I think there's much better bass playing on Too Fast for Love, the album itself, the album before, and maybe some good stuff later on. I think he's a better songwriter. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, he's a pretty competent bass player. I don't think I'd put him above Geddy Lee, Michael Anthony, and Rudy Sarso. But maybe Gene Simmons. There it is. Next up is Best Guitarist, and I think of most of these are fairly reasonable. One is really not. We're going to get to that. At number 5, we have Matthias Jabs. And no, don't say Matthias Jabs, for hell's sake. Stop that. Great guitar player. He is in the Scorpions, of course. He is part of that double guitar threat along with Rudy Schenker. I think the two of them sound amazing on Love at First Sting. Matthias came in on Love Drive, I believe, back in 79, but he really found himself after a few albums. His guitar tone is amazing on that record as well. Yeah, I give it to him absolutely hands down here at number 5, for sure. At number 4, we have Randy Rhoads. He's up from number 5. That's nice to see. The late Randy Rhoads just getting more and more popular, even though he's dead at this point, for the last couple of years at least at this point. Love Randy Rhoads. Those first 2 Ozzy Osbourne albums are just amazing. He even did some interesting stuff in Quiet Riot, back in the 70s. He was on those 2 Japanese-only albums. Those have been reissued, by the way. Who was the label that put them out? I want to say No Remorse Records. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the label that reissued them. He does some incredible stuff. Even if the music isn't your forte, the guitar playing is still amazing. Just check that stuff out. Randy Rhoads, amazing guy. And number 3 is Jakey Lee. This is kind of interesting. Jakey Lee of Ozzy Osbourne fame. He was on a couple albums. He's not the direct replacement for Randy Rhoads. Brad Gillis was in the middle of there, but although Brad Gillis was on loan from Night Ranger, he went back to Night Ranger. This is after Speak of the Devil. But Jakey Lee's an amazing guitar player. At this point, this is between Bark at the Moon and The Ultimate Sin. He's the best thing on The Ultimate Sin, as I've said before, but even Bark at the Moon, which I think has some great songs. I think that album gets counted out a lot. Jakey Lee's guitar playing is amazing. He even does some cool stuff in Badlands. You should check those records out as well. But yeah, Jakey Lee, I have no problems with him on this list whatsoever. However, at number 2, we've got Mick Mars of Motley Crue. Mick's a competent guitar player for what he does, but he is by no means a top guitar player, even 1984 or any other year. That's bizarre to me. You know who should be in this slot, especially in 1984, is Warren DeMartini of Rat. He should be here because he is amazing. A bit of an Eddie Van Halen protege of sorts, someone we're going to talk about shortly. He should definitely be here. His guitar playing is amazing. If you listen to Out of the Cellar, you hear him right away. He's better than Robin Crosby, and I think even Crosby's fairly competent. But Warren DeMartini, even to this day, holds his own. He's right up there with George Lynch and a whole lot of other guys. But yeah, Mick Mars. Why? Of course, I wrote it for you already. Number 1 guitar player, still at number 1 from last year, is, of course, Eddie Van Halen. Who beats Eddie Van Halen in 1984? And I mean the year. Maybe the album, too. I don't know. But, yeah. There's not much to say about that. He's Eddie Van Halen. He's got to be on the list. He's got to be number 1. It'd be interesting to see if he falls at all in future years. But there he is. Still at 1. Next up is Best Album Producer. This is kind of an interesting category because you have to figure that by and large, a lot of the Circus magazine readers maybe aren't musicians or haven't really been in a recording studio or even producers themselves. I wonder how this gets chosen, a lot of these choices. I mean, how many people know what a producer really does? I mean, do they know they're actually producing? Are they engineering? Are they involved in not only the recording process, but mixing and mastering? Like, they don't know. So they're probably just going to pick those names they see on the backs of the album jackets. I'm going to guess. Yeah, I think all 5 of these kind of reflect that. But there's some good choices in here too. Maybe they're just lucky guesses. I don't know. Anyways, number 5 is Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. That's fascinating. This is for, of course, Animalize is the album. Before this, they were with Michael James Jackson. I think he did a competent job. I don't know why they couldn't have gotten him again. Maybe they just want to take things into their own hands. And they do start producing a little bit later on by themselves as well, until Crazy Nights at least. I don't know. Animalize is a good album. I don't know if it's well produced. Some of the sound on it is a little bit flat. I think the songwriting is there. There are some filler tracks, of course. But yeah, I think this is just name recognition and popularity for sure. At number 4, we've got Tom Werman. Of course, he produced Stay Hungry for Twisted Sister, as well as Tooth and Nail from Dokken. I don't know why we're not talking about Tooth and Nail on this list very much. That disturbs me a little bit. It's a great album. This might also be for Shout at the Devil. I mean, we know that's 1983, but Tom Werman was responsible for that album as well. He's a great producer. He was a big deal in this era for a lot of these sort of pop metal acts, later for other hair metal bands, to use those terms somewhat interchangeably, although they aren't always interchangeable. I know that. But yeah, Tom Werman, he should be here for sure. At number 3, we've got Martin Birch. He is still at number 3 from last year, which is pretty interesting. Martin Birch, of course, is the Iron Maiden producer. He did Peace of Mind. He did Power Slaves. That's why we're seeing him here. Apparently, they thought a lot about the producer here, which is pretty interesting. And he did a good job, so why not? At number 2, we got Mutt Lange. He's down from number 1. He was number 1 last year. And, of course, Mutt Lange produced Pyromania for Def Leppard, but that was last year. I mean, I don't know what Mutt Lange produced in 1984. I didn't look on Discogs beforehand. I just don't know. So you can tell me in the comments, just because I'm having a mind fade on that one. But I don't remember anything really big from Mutt Lange, especially that would fit into the category of heavy metal or even some of the hard rock offerings here. But he's a great producer. I mean, put him on the list, right? But yeah, he was doing a little bit less in 1984, it would seem. Again, argue with me in the comments, because maybe I just don't know. Anyways, at number 1, this makes sense, of course, it's Ted Templeman. He's up from number 2 from last year. Ted Templeman, of course, is the Van Halen producer. And he did a decent job. I don't like the drum sound on 1984 all that much, but barring that, I think there's some good mix on that record and all of that. So yeah, makes sense. 1984, Van Halen, they're going to be all over the place at this point. So yeah, Ted Templeman at number 1. Next up is Best Songwriter or Songwriters. Some interesting choices. I think some predictable ones as well. This one might not be the latter. At number 5, we have Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons of Kiss. Again, Animalize. Was it really that big of an album? I mean, I like Animalize. It's not one of my favorite albums from them. I think Lick It Up and Creatures of the Night are way better albums. I think even Asylum has more moments to it than Animalize does. Again, I think Animalize has some filler on it. Overall, I like the album, but I just don't see great songwriting on it necessarily. I think Gene and Paul have written better songs in the past and also in the future. I think there's some great stuff. Even in the 90s, I think they did some interesting songwriting. But I don't know if I see it on Animalize as much. So, interesting choice there. At number 4, we have Neil Peart, and I guess this is a moment where I've just learned something. Again, I don't know a lot about Rush, and I was kind of unsure who wrote a lot of the songs in Rush, or most of the songs, or was a strong songwriter in the band. Neil Peart seems to be the one, I guess. Let me know, you Rush fans out there, if he was that instrumental in some of the songwriting. Maybe it was Geddy Lee, maybe it was the whole band. I don't know. So I'm just going to leave it here at number 4. There it is. At number 3, we have Steve Harris of Iron Maiden. He's down from number 2. Again, a reaction to Power Slave versus Peace of Mind. I don't know. I think Steve Harris is an amazing songwriter. I think he should be considerably higher on this list, considering who else we have. We're going to talk about that shortly. Not that I'm too disappointed with the numbers 1 and 2 choices, but I still think he should be a little bit higher. I think he's a great songwriter. At number 2, we have Van Halen. I guess the entire band is a songwriter. Sure, why not? They've written some catchy songs in their career, and I think 1984 has some catchy stuff on it. Again, even some of the B-side and deep cut stuff on that record is pretty interesting. Synths aside, don't really need those, but, you know, there they are. Number 1 is interesting. It is Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue. I will defend this a little bit. I think Nikki Sixx is a great songwriter for what he does. Musically, I think so. I think he's a better lyricist at times than he is a music writer. He's certainly a better lyricist than Vince Neil. If you check some of those credits out, you can see the dip in quality from Nicky down to Vince. It's pretty obvious. But yeah, I don't argue this. Nikki Sixx has written some amazing songs, and I think he got better as he went too, in a lot of ways. Maybe after, Dr. Feelgood, things were a little bit spotty, but they were spotty for all of them, let's be honest. But here in 1984, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if Shot at the Devil is the best gauge. There is some great stuff on there. Again, Shot at the Devil is a bit of a simple album. It's very anthemic, but it's also very basic on a lot of levels. But still charming as hell, and there's some great songs. But yeah, give it to Nikki Sixx for #1 Best Songwriter. Why not? Next up is Best Female Vocalist, and this is where we're going to see more pop acts, or pop artists, as you will. Some don't think women are really prominent in hard rock and heavy metal in 1984, at least as much as they should be. On the more independent metal circuit, you are seeing the rise of bands that are female-fronted. Bitch comes to mind, of course. Chastain. But also later, we had some of the more hair metal offerings like Vixen and Femme Fatale and bands like that. But we weren't seeing a lot of it in the spotlight in 1984. So this list kind of reflects mostly pop artists. And we'll just go through them. Why not? At #5, we have Patti Smythe of Scandal. Not Patti Smith. That's someone totally different. Scandal at the time had that song The Warrior out in 1984. It was a pretty big music video. MTV played the crap out of it every other hour. I remember the fall, especially, of 1984. But, Patti Smythe, good-looking woman, and she can sing pretty great, too. So, #5 makes some sense. At #4, we've got Stevie Nicks. She is probably doing the solo career, as I said. I don't think she's in Fleetwood Mac at this point. She's down from #2, which is interesting. I don't know why that star is falling so much. Again, I didn't follow his solo career all that much. And I'm not a big Fleetwood Mac fan either way. So there's that. But here she is at #4. At #3, we have Cyndi Lauper. That makes some sense. I mean, Cyndi Lauper was a thing in 1984. She had a string of hits. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Time After Time, She Bop, all that stuff. And do we like her voice? She has kind of a nasally voice. It's kind of high register and a little whiny, but she's adorable. She is the 1980s in so many ways. And I think she can sing. I think Time After Time gives you more of an idea of that. But yeah, Cyndi Lauper, #3. All right. At #2, we've got Pat Benatar. She's down from #1. Admittedly, I think Pat's star is falling at this point. I think the album was Tropico in 1984. I think it had this, We Belong was on there, but I don't remember anything else. I remember Pat Benatar from much earlier work. You've got songs like Promises in the Dark and Fire and Ice and Heartbreaker. There was some good stuff in her early career, but I don't know if she was doing as well in 1984, because all I can remember is that one song. But she's still on the list. Still great set of pipes. And she's still performing, by the way. I saw some stuff on YouTube with her recently, so good on her. #1, I like seeing this, of course. She is up from #5 from last year. So she has really come up in the world, I guess, according to Circus Magazine's readers. Of course, I'm talking about Lita Ford. 1984, we've got Dancin' on the Edge. I think it's her second album. I know Out for Blood was out as well before that. Great era for Lita Ford. I love her voice. I think she just did a lot better once she was in her own band. I didn't think as much about her in the Runaways. But as a metal singer and guitar player, I think she really does a great job. Later, Lita Ford, I'm not so much into once we get to Kiss Me Deadly and Close My Eyes Forever. Kind of check out on Lita, but there's some great stuff in this era, especially 1984. I get it. Best female vocalist? Yeah, Lita Ford for sure. Next up is Best Male Vocalist, and it is pretty interesting. They separate the men from the women on this list. I don't know if that's because men's and women's voices are register-wise different a lot of times. Tonally, they're different. Delivery as well. I'm not sure. But in 1984, maybe it's good to do that, because I think if there was just a male vocalist list or just a vocalist list, maybe men would dominate it, because a lot of singers in 1984 in heavy metal were men. So maybe it's good to have that separate category, at least in the 80s. Later on, who knows? So anyways, let's get to it. At #5, we have Stephen Pearcy of Rat. And I'm going to defend this one a little bit. I think Stephen Pearcy had a really cool, unique voice when Rat came out, especially when Out of the Cellar hit. I love the sound of his voice. I think it still holds up more or less to this day. I think it's miles better now than, say, Vince Neil and Don Dokken. They seem to not be doing very well in the singing department. Pearcy is better than those two, which may or may not be saying something. But Yeah. And I love Stephen Pearcy's solo efforts. I have talked about them on episodes of Vinyl Hall, some of those records. So, yeah, he's still around. Rat's more or less still around. So, yeah, Stephen Pearcy. There you go. At number 4, we have Rob Halford of Judas Priest. Love seeing Rob on this list. Maybe he should be a little higher, as well as the number 3 guy. And we're going to bitch about numbers 1 and 2 shortly, just to give you a heads up about that. Defenders of the Faith, man. I love that album so much. He rules on that album. And I know I sound like I'm 16 years old by saying rules, but it's totally true. Right away from like Free Will Burning all the way to the end. Oh, so killer. The Sentinel alone shows a lot of his range. I could just pick track by track off that record and tell you how amazing Rob sounds on it. But you've heard the album already. You know. And if you haven't, shame on you. So anyways, the number 3 is Ronnie James Dio. Of course, this man should always be higher on a vocalist list. He is amazing. The Last in Line, of course, is the album from 1984. Great album. I love him on the title track quite a bit. I love Egypt the Chains Are On, which is the last song on the album. I do love some of the deep cuts on that record quite a bit. The whole album back to back is front to back, rather, is amazing with Ronnie on it. So, yeah, excellent choice. But now we get to the top 2, and it gets a little bit strange from here. At number 2 is David Lee Roth. He is up from number 3, so he's doing better this year. But, yeah, I think as a vocalist, I've always had a problem with David Lee Roth. He is an amazing performer. He is a showman of sorts. He can get a crowd going, but as a singer, he's fine. He's all right. He is better than the number 1 choice. We'll get to that in a bit. But I don't think he should be this high on the list at all. Again, this is a popularity pick for sure, because it's Van Halen in 1984 and all that. So yeah, David Lee Roth. All right. So anyways, let's get to number 1. Of course, it's Vince Neil of Motley Crue. How did this happen? I don't even know. Slightly defending this, but not really. Vince Neil has always sounded better on record than he does live. And that's always been the case. I mean, go back to the US 83 festival when Motley Crue is at. You can find it on YouTube. Vince is still pulling a lot of the same shenanigans as he does now. He babbles the lyrics a bunch. He hits the notes kind of, sort of. He was a better singer back then, but not by a lot. I think he was a bit of a studio creation. There are singers like that who sound way better on record. I believe Ozzy Osbourne's one of those people too, by the way, especially in his solo career. But, you know, fight me in the comments, I guess. Otherwise, Vince Neil does not belong here. Let's kick him off the list. You can put David Lee Roth at 5 and move all 3 of these other guys up, especially Ronnie James Dio. He should be number 1. We all know that. Next up is Best in Concert Group, and I can say I've seen all 5 of these bands live, though maybe just one of them specifically in 1984. Of course, that would be our number 5 choice. It is Kiss. Kiss was touring their Animalize album at the time. I saw them live. Wasp opened. They were on their first album. Pretty amazing show, but one has to ask themselves, does that stage show compare to the stuff they did in the 70s with the makeup and the blood and all that other stuff? I think Kiss did keep some of that stuff. They kept the pyrotechnics and the fire breathing, and the lights and all that stuff, but I don't know. Of course, it's a different crowd of people liking Kiss at this point. You know, the 80s teenagers, such as myself, were buying the tickets at that time. So, yeah, I don't know. The label obviously thought enough of the tour because they did release the Detroit 84 show on home video. That would be Animalize Live Uncensored. They even put it on MTV in a censored form. Before that, that's how I first saw the show, before I saw it live. So, yeah, I can see them being a good in-concert group in 1984. I mean, yeah, why not? At number 4, we've got the Scorpions. I saw the Scorpions later on. I didn't see them on the Love at First Sting tour. I saw them probably a few years later when Monsters of Rock Festival came to the U.S. But they're a great band live. Still a lot of energy. I did see some recent footage of them, at least from a few years ago, and they are still kicking it. Like, just running all over the place and lots of energy. Klaus still sounds incredible. So, yeah, Scorpions, they are a great band live for sure. Number 3, we've got Judas Priest, the mighty Judas Priest. Got to have him here. I did not get to see the Defenders of the Faith tour, but I've seen plenty of home video of it, and especially on YouTube, and it looks like an amazing show. I mean, obviously the laser show and the battalion in the back with the jaws and all that stuff, and Rob, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I could definitely see Judas Priest here at number 3. Makes a lot of sense. And number 2 is Motley Crue. This is an interesting choice, maybe a popularity pick again. I don't know how they were on this particular tour. Visually, they were very interesting in 1984. They had the sort of heavy metal outfits and the odd makeup. I did see them on Theater of Pain, where they looked very, very different. They did put on a pretty good show, though. Again, Vince is a good showman of sorts. Back then he was. I don't know how he's doing so well now. But so I'm sure that the Shot at the Devil tour is pretty good as well. So we'll give it to them. Why not? And number 1 is Van Halen. They are up from number 3. People are thinking more of the Van Halen shows, apparently. I have seen footage of them from this tour. Dave Lee Roth, man, he is Mr. Energy. He is all over the place. Of course, you got all the great musicianship from the other 3 guys. I can just assume that show was amazing no matter where you saw it. I did see them later on again, Monsters of Rock, probably 1988. That was with Sammy Hagar instead. I stayed for one song and then left just to say that I've seen Van Halen. But I really wasn't part of the Van Hagar era at all. I'm a Diamond Dave guy all the way. So there it is, number 1, Van Halen. Next up is Best New Artist or Group, distinguished from just Best Artist or Group. We're going to talk about that shortly. These are definitely new acts in 1984, or new to most people, let's put it that way. And number 5, we've got Bon Jovi, which I guess makes a whole lot of sense, but if you had asked me at 16 years old if that made sense, I would have called you crazy. Because I remember seeing the video for Runaway in 1984 on MTV and thinking to myself, this guy's going to go nowhere. Who's going to like this? He's basically a pop metal version of Aldo Nova, to throw a name out there. Never thought he'd make it. Of course, I was wrong. Really wrong. I also do remember that probably a year or 2 later, when his popularity got a little bigger, definitely girls were listening to Bon Jovi quite a bit. And to that effect, a buddy of mine and I did tape a Bon Jovi album from someone, and we basically put it in the car when we went cruising for girls, basically as girl bait. And invariably, we would pick girls up on the strength of playing this tape that we really hated a lot. I mean, we really hated whatever the album was, one of the first 3. And they loved it. So we just kept playing it in the car. We drove by really cute girls. There's that story. Bon Jovi at number 5 is really the point here. At number 4, we've got Wasp. Great choice. That first Wasp album, self-titled, of course, is amazing. Again, great live show from them on that tour. I have nothing but great things to say about Wasp on the first album. I don't think it was ever really duplicated, the power and the heavy metal just sensibilities on that record. I think they did good albums after that, but I just don't think anything really compares to that first record. But maybe that's just me. Maybe you feel different. Let me know in the comments. At number 3, we got Motley Crue. They're still at number 3 from last year, which is okay, I guess. Are they new again? Apparently they are. So here they are. At number 2, we got Twisted Sister. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I like Stay Hungry. I'm more of a fan of You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, their previous album. I came in on that album in particular. I remember hearing Stay Hungry when it first came out and thinking it was very mainstream sounding, and it didn't grab me as much. It didn't have the balls, the gravitas, if you will, of You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, but I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed most of the songs. I think the hits off that album are a little tired. I think even back then they got a little tired a little quickly for me. But the videos are fun, so there's that. Anyways, at number 1 for Best New Artist or Group is Rat. And that does make sense. I think it makes more sense in 1984 because that album was just huge. Out of the Cellar was just all over the place. And MTV did play the videos left and right, of course, but even the radio was playing Round and Round pretty much nonstop. So totally get that Rat's at number 1. And of course, this brings us to the Best Artist or Group. Yes, it's the category you've all been waiting for. And number 5 is Judas Priest. So excited to see Judas Priest, at least in a few of these categories. They could do no wrong in 1984. I probably just said that before, but hell, I'm going to say it again. Even the 80s in general, I'll even give them Turbo a little bit. Not as much. But yeah, Defenders of the Faith, killer album. I still play that front to back like it just came out. It's an amazing record. So pretty excited to see them here. And number 4 is Kiss. Again, Animalize. I keep coming back to this because I like the album, but yeah, I don't know. But I'm happy to see Kiss here. I mean, they're my favorite band. I'm not really bitching about it too much. But yeah, I just didn't know there were so many other people that liked Kiss as much as I did in 1984. And specifically the 1984 era of them. So all right. Number 3, we got Iron Maiden. They're still at number 3 from last year, so that's pretty cool. But it still begs the question, how much did everyone love Power Slave? Did they love it a lot? Did they love it a little? I loved it quite a bit. But again, maybe I liked Peace of Mind a little bit more. So there you are. Number 2, we got Motley Crue. It's got to be Shout at the Devil. It's a great album. I mean, it's not going to win the awards for musical composition or, complex arrangements. But it's a great anthemic album. You can bang your head to it, bang the fist as well to it. Sure, why not? And of course, the number 1 best artist or group. I don't think this is any real surprise. They are up from number 2 last year. It is, of course, Van Halen. That 1984 album just keeps cropping up all over the place. But again, I get it. It's a good album. And like last time, I'm going to read part of the summary for these results because why not? I also need these because old. So, it was not so much a landslide by any one band as a triumph of style that distinguished the 1984 poll results. Even in the Best Female Vocalist division, traditionally a stronghold of more melodic music than that usually sung by, say, Ian Gillan, leathered Lita Ford was the clear favorite. If an established artist wavered in its commitment to the brotherhood of crunchy guitar music, it sometimes suffered. Witness last year's Heavy's Quiet Riot, voted biggest disappointment and biggest mouth of 1984. There were a few surprises as heavy rock, long deemed unplayable by self-appointed guardians of the airwaves, turned up more and more in videos and on 45s. The classroom cut-up behavior of Twisted Sister found its best outlet when Lens for TV, and groups like Rat and Scorpions, both strong on riffs and structure, hit with Round and Round and Rock You Like a Hurricane. Meanwhile, former reader favorites like Journey and Pat Benatar slipped in this year's tally. So there it is, Circus Magazine. 1984 Readers' Poll winners. Of course, since I already covered 1983 and 1984, it makes sense that I'd also discuss the Readers' Poll for 1985. Definitely let me know your thoughts on these poll results and these videos in general, and of course, your thoughts on me doing a 1985 one. Maybe you even have some memories of Circus Magazine from way back then. Let me know all of that and anything else that makes sense in the comments below. Of course, if you're new to the channel, just so you know, my name is Matt. This is the Accusation Network, where each and every week I do videos on metal vinyl collecting. I also cover classic and modern metal in general. If you like that, definitely like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and share this video with some friends. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.